You're listening to The Invisible Addiction, a podcast series investigating problem gambling in the UK. In this episode, I speak with George Cooper, a freelance journalist who used to suffer from a gambling addiction, especially to online slot machines. I wanted to find out about his story. What drew him to gambling? How did he stop? What changes would he like to see to make gambling safer? George has written lots of interesting gambling-related articles on his blog, and you can reach out to him on Twitter @GeorgeICooper. Finally, if you haven't already, do check out theinvisibleaddiction.com with links to podcasts, vlogs, blog posts, and more importantly, support networks in the UK for people struggling with gambling problems. Without further ado, here is the conversation between George and I. Enjoy! Okay, so joining us on the other end of the line today is George, who has very kindly given up his time today to tell us a little bit more about his story. So George, first and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm very well. A little bit warm, but I think that's the same for everyone at the moment. But yeah, I'm very well.
Yeah, no. I was going to say for the listeners, we're recording this late in June when it's a heat wave right now. It's absolutely sweltering. So
it is.
Yeah. So George, I suppose obviously today we're going to talk a little bit more about your story and hear about how you started, getting into gambling and your experience and such like. So I suppose a good starting point would be to ask you if you could perhaps briefly just describe maybe a bit more about your background experience before we kind of dive into the gambling. So I don't know if you want to just spend maybe a minute or two just telling the listeners a little bit more about yourself and give yourself an introduction, as it were.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a journalist, or a content editor, I should say, at a newspaper. I'm 35. I was born and brought up in London. Went to school in London. Went to university in London, and then worked on my local newspaper when I was sort of in my 20s, and then a couple of national newspapers since then.
Fantastic. And whereabouts in London are you from? Are you allowed to share? Are you okay to share that information?
Just down the road from Wembley Stadium. It's a little place. It's called Dollis Hill, but no one's ever heard of Dollis Hill, so I always just say it's near Wembley, and people seem to recognise that.
I was going to say, I think I've been there once upon a time. It's isn't it on the Jubilee line?
It is on the Jubilee line. Yes.
Many moons ago, I went for a band rehearsal there, and I've not been back since.
Oh, really?
Sorry about that, George.
No, there's not much there.
Okay. Very nice. So I don't know. I suppose there's no easy way to get into this, but I suppose. How did you get into betting? I've read your article, Gambling and Me, the secret world of online casino addiction. Did you start in 2016, or was this something that you began earlier?
It's funny because I've been thinking about this quite a lot, sort of over the last week or so, and I remember as far back as when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I remember kind of being at the seaside with my parents, and they have those arcades at the seaside with those little sort of two-piece slot, the ledgers that push the money over the edge. So I always remember being sort of 8 or 9 or 10 years old and just kind of going there with my family, and it was a typical day out. But I just remember, even at that age, just enjoying it a little bit too much, just being a little bit too excited by kind of this money sort of pouring over the edge of the ledge and everything. So that's kind of my earliest memory ever of sort of having some awareness of a gambling instinct. And then it went away. Then I sort of, gambling wasn't even part of my life until 2016, when I went traveling with my now ex-fiance, and we went to Las Vegas. And it was kind of a similar thing in Las Vegas. I remember, obviously, when you're in Vegas, you go to the casinos, and I remember spending a little bit of money in the casinos. Not, we didn't have much money because we were traveling, but probably about $100 over about 4 days. But again, just being aware that just the thrill was more than I was kind of. It was just a bit too much, and I remember coming back from Las Vegas thinking, "Wow, I don't really want to go there again because I think bad things could happen."
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, the problem really started after that because then I was having relationship difficulties, and that was when I had too much free time, really, and
Mm.
then kind of gradually slid into the online casino, the murky online casino
Yeah,
world. That was when it really kicked off.
yeah, sure. I mean, um, were you enticed into the online casinos with the free bets and such like, or um, was it almost
Um,
like from a hangover from the Las Vegas trip?
it was the hangover from the Vegas trip. I remember sort of wanting to sort of experience that online slot gambling again, and I kind of thought, well, there must be, online casinos, and I was aware of sort of Ladbrokes and William Hill and
Mm.
Bet365 and that sort of thing. So I think the first account I opened was just a Ladbrokes account. Literally just kind of one afternoon with nothing to do.
Mm.
Opened the account, deposited maybe 25, 30 quid, something like that. Lost it. And that was kind of it. It sort of gradually snowballed from there, from kind of small losses to ever bigger losses.
Yeah, sure. I mean, were you ever into like football betting? So, for example, in my
Mm.
case, like football betting was almost like the gateway, like a football accumulator bet
Yeah,
took me into the into the bookie. So, I mean,
yeah,
had you obviously were you involved with sports betting at all beforehand as well?
yeah. Actually, a little bit. And funny, until you say it, I'd forgotten that. But yeah, I did. Probably 7 or 8 years ago, I sort of went through a period of placing accumulator bets,
Mm.
football accumulator bets, kind of every weekend. And I'm sure anyone who's done an accumulator bet, that they're quite enticing because the more sort of teams you add to an accumulator bet, the bigger your potential win. So again, it's that kind of slippery slope of you start to just bet more, on more teams, and then you place more accumulator bets. So yeah, kind of. But like I said, I'd completely forgotten that until you just said it. But yeah, there was a period where I did sort of one or two a weekend. But again, that never really took hold of me in the same way that online casinos did for whatever reason.
No, sure. And who's your team, George? Who do you support?
I'm a Liverpool fan.
Oh,
So as we
Southern
record this,
Scouser.
yeah, plastic scouser, yeah. Can't you tell by my strong Liverpool accent?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think as we record this, I think we're one game away from the title. So yeah,
Well,
good times.
there we
Yeah.
go. There we go. Fun, good time. Fun, good time. So, um, okay, fair enough. So I suppose let's get into a bit more about the online casinos and such like. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so you mentioned slots. I mean, was that your fix? Was it just slots, or were there other games as well?
No, it was funny. It was just slots, and I think that's only because I don't really know how to play roulette, and I don't really know how to play blackjack. So I never really got drawn to it. But slots, they they're just so easy to get drawn into,
Mm,
and there's so many on any online casino.
mm,
As anyone who's gambled will know, there are just so many different slots to choose from. I mean, we're talking hundreds on each casino. So it was, yeah, there was just something about them particularly that kind of really drew me in, and drew me in very quickly. It
mm,
was an addiction that took hold within weeks, and I could feel myself becoming addicted. Some addicts say they weren't aware of it, but I could feel myself being drawn into it. But it's
mm,
almost like you're being drawn into a black hole, and you kind of can't, you sort of can't pull yourself out of it.
mm.
Um, yeah, yeah, it was a difficult thing to deal with.
I can totally relate to the feeling of being in a black hole.
Mm,
Yeah, it's a bit like you'd be searching for the walls, but you just can't find them to get out. Um, you're getting sucked in.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, when you say you were quickly feeling like you were getting addicted, what were you
yeah.
noticing?
Well, for me, it became a sort of an escape because I was, as I say, I was going through a breakup at the time, which was really traumatic, and I was really depressed.
Mm,
For late 2016, most of 2017, I was being treated for depression. So, kind of gambling became an escape from that, a real escape where I didn't have to think about anything that was going on. And at the time, I considered it to be relaxing, which is
Mm.
pretty mental when you think about it, because you're feeding money into a casino. But for me, it became my escape, and so gradually I was spending 3 or 4 hours a session, and then there were times where I was then spending 6 or 7 or 8 hours, sort of wasting entire days gambling online.
Really, really.
Yeah,
Blimey.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, no, as I say, I'm sorry to hear that, and yeah, I mean, again, sorry, I'm just sort of nodding here and sort of daydreaming on, thinking how, yeah, it was. I can relate to a lot of what you've said. So, yeah,
yeah.
it's
It, it's
yeah,
it's I mean, it's interesting to look back, because I think I said it. I mean, I wrote a blog on this, before we spoke, and most of 2017 and most of 2018, I actually can't really remember. I can't really remember what I did. The
wow,
standout memory for me is gambling, and I know I mean, I was a freelance journalist at the time. I was a freelance copywriter. I was working on projects, but it got to a stage where I was constructing the rest of my life around my gambling time, and financially as well. I was, you know, payday would come, and I'd sort of set aside X amount for gambling,
mm,
and but it became sort of a normal for me. It's, like they say now, it was the new normal. It was just kind of, yeah, it's scary really how much of a grip it kind of took of me for at least sort of 2.5 years.
wow. I was going to say, I mean, I don't know if you could, maybe we could touch on a little bit more like about your experience. So like the betting experience. So,
Yeah,
obviously like
yeah,
playing slots and whatnot, you've got the colours, you've got the sounds, you've got the excitement.
yeah,
What was, I
yeah,
just want to sort of tap into your psyche, I suppose, but
yeah.
what was your mindset at the time?
What was my mindset?
Was it like, well, actually, no, sorry, I'll let you answer before I try and give you, you know,
Yeah, no, I don't honestly know. One thing I do know was, for me, it was never really about winning lots of money, which
okay.
sounds which sounds bizarre. I mean, again, for a lot of people, gamble is about you're chasing the big wins, and I was chasing the big wins, but not. I don't know, not for the amount of money. It's a very hard thing to do. It was just the rush, that sort of that adrenaline rush, or dopamine rush, as it is,
Yeah.
of winning. And obviously with online slots, you get things like, you get free spins, you
Mm,
get bonuses. There's lots of different little ways, little bursts of excitement with online slots, and I think that makes it unique when you compare it to something like roulette, or to blackjack, or even to football betting. There's lots of different ways
mm.
that you get that rush, and I think it's those little rushes which kept me sort of coming back.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm just now thinking back a little bit to I think is that game, is it Rainbow Riches? That's
Rainbow Riches, yes,
I think
yes,
having been a former sort of Ladbrokes connoisseur, if
yeah,
that's even the right word to use. I
yeah, yeah,
yeah, was a big player of Rainbow Riches, actually, sort of towards the end of my problems, and yeah, it was
yeah,
crazy actually, because again you could put £100 in and just keep
yeah,
pressing click, and you just be stuck pressing click 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 click, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
you go down to 50 quid, and then every now and again you'd spark out, and there'd be a big win. You might go
yeah,
onto the ladder or
yeah,
whatever it is, um,
yeah.
and and then
Yeah.
you might win, I don't know, 200 quid or whatever it would be. So um,
And
yeah.
one thing I had in my experience, and I've spoken to other gamblers who've had this as well. There seems to be a pattern where if you join a casino, so let's say you join Ladbrokes today, and I start gambling on Rainbow Riches, you do seem to get a big win very early on. Within the first few hours or the first couple of days of gambling. I remember, and again, I put this in my blog. I remember
Was it?
winning
Yeah,
winning £2,000 in a
yeah.
single spin. um Early 2017,
Jeez.
that would have been, and that was the moment where I went from betting 25, 50 quid here and there, to kind of betting 200 or 300 pounds at a time.
Wow.
um and that's it's kind of anecdotal evidence, but I'm certain that's something which the casinos do
Mm,
to hook you in and
mm,
to keep you there.
mm, mm,
Yeah, and I found that several times. You join a new casino, and they sort of what they do is they let you build a balance.
mm.
So you find
Yeah.
if you join this casino, you have a few moderate wins, and you go maybe to having a balance of £1,000 or something,
Mm,
and it gives you that false sense of profitability. you know. And then obviously then you lose the money, and then that's when you start chasing, and that's when it becomes dangerous.
God. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's too close to too close to home. It's all too familiar. It's
yeah. Well,
frightening actually. Yeah.
this is it, and this is sorry if I'm interrupting you, but
No,
I
no,
mean
no, no,
it's
not at all.
I'm sure we all share this sense of frustration. There's a lot. Gambling is quite in the national conversation at the moment. Alongside a lot of other stuff, that there is a push against gambling companies. But I don't think, unless you've had the addiction, I don't think you can really understand it, and I don't think you can really relate to just how they hook you.
Mm,
So my concern is that I think I'm in a minority, and I'd like to see online gambling completely banned in the UK, and I'm sure that won't happen.
mm,
But I think it's so dangerous. Online slots in particular, I think there are many more addicts out there than we know and
mm,
than people are suggesting. But the only way to really highlight the problem is to keep on speaking about it, and things like your podcast. You speak to as many different people who share the same experiences.
mm.
It helps to get it out there.
No, no, well, I mean, it's very nice of you to say. I mean, honestly, it's for people out there that need help, and also
Yeah,
I think for people that if we can support each other, like
yeah.
just talking about it. I don't know about you, but sometimes even when I'm just talking about it, it kind of sometimes feels a little bit like therapy,
Yeah,
in a kind of
it
way.
does. But what
Yeah.
it definitely does. And actually, I mean, it was. Again, I don't know if this is something you've experienced or other people will, but I didn't tell anyone about my addiction for a long, long time. I kept a secret for a good 18 months or 2 years,
Mm,
and in the end, I told one of my best friends, and it turns out he had an almost identical problem. His was slightly different in that he was going to bookies, and his was a sort of a problem he had in bookies.
right.
But he was very similar to me. He's I think he's 4 years younger than me. He's a working professional. He's a really intelligent guy, really smart guy, and to speak to him, to look at him, you would not think he was somebody who would be sort of predisposed to addiction. But
Mm,
I think it just shows that as I was saying, I think there are so many people who have this problem.
mm.
I really do think it's a much bigger problem than than people are aware of.
No, sure, 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 sure. I mean, uh, you mentioned about your friend there. I mean,
Mm.
again, again, from reading your blog post and a little bit about your
Yeah,
story. I mean, it sounded like you were kind of counselling for each other in a way. I mean,
yeah,
maybe
we
you could
were.
say a bit more about that. I don't know. It's very interesting. It's to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I say counselling. It was more sort of. We both just seemed to be at similar positions in our lives. He had also broken up with his girlfriend at almost the same time as me. So we both had an addiction. We both knew or thought we knew at the time the root of the addiction, which was kind of essentially depression.
Mm,
Um, so it would just be a case of if one of us had a relapse, which we fairly regularly did, we would just text each other and say, "Oh, God, I've just lost 500 quid or whatever."
mm,
And it was just having somebody say to you, "You know what? That's okay. That's going to happen.
mm,
You're on top of this, but just don't beat yourself up." I think that's important. Is that if somebody has an addiction,
mm,
it's not their fault, and it's nothing they've done. It's just addiction is a chemical process in the brain.
mm.
So the most important thing you can do is just tell someone and just get it out, just get it off your chest.
Yeah.
And once you do that, it makes a huge difference to your mindset. And then, with my friend, I think we both have had that experience, and we're both now gradually, I think, coming out of the other side of it. I think he's slightly more advanced than I am in terms of getting over it. I think I'm still slightly prone to kind of, relapses.
Mm.
But yeah, I think yeah, talking about it definitely helps.
No, definitely, definitely. I think a very interesting thing that you said about, like it's not your fault.
Mm,
Spoke
yeah,
to spoke to a sort of trained hypnotherapist, and
right.
who was on one of the podcasts, and he was just saying, he had one of his clients that he just turned around and said, look, it's not your fault,
Yeah,
and I think and that really changed her mindset, because I
yeah,
think especially with gambling, isn't it, that it weighs on your shoulders so much, and
it does.
yeah, there's
Yeah,
layers of guilt and shame. So as soon as you realise that it's not your fault, that can be quite a revelation, I think.
yeah, it can, and I think I think it also it's just it sounds silly to say, but it's just accepting that, like, when it's one thing to say to yourself, it's not my fault. But then I think it helps to really look at why it's not your fault. And that's what I started to do with the help of other kind of people who've had this problem. Is I started to look at the behavior of the casinos, and I started to look at the behavior of the betting companies.
Mm.
And then you realize, well, actually, you're just kind of there for the taking. They are specifically targeting particularly people like us, men, relatively young men who, you know, we seem to be the target for a lot of gambling companies. Sometimes it kind of feels like you don't have a chance.
What,
It's
why do you think that is, George? Sorry to interrupt you there. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we are targeted?
do you know what? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I know a lot of men in their early to mid 30s suffer from depression and that sort of thing, anxiety.
Mm.
I don't know. I'm not an expert in it, but it's possible, I suppose, that we just at that stage of life
Mm.
where I don't know where you kind of are ripe for something like that.
Mm.
One thing I do know is that gambling companies have sort of psychotherapists working for them, and people who are paid to study the people who gamble. They learn an awful lot about their customers, and they learn a lot about people who gamble, and they use that back against you because gambling companies, they all have this message about gamble responsibly, and what is it, when the fun stops, stop.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think that's how their justification will be, well, we've got the message out there, we've got the links to GamCare or to GamStop or whatever, and if you want to lose your money, that's down to you. But that's not true at all, because it's all subconscious. Addiction is subconscious. You don't consciously become addicted. It's your subconscious.
Mm.
um yeah.
No, definitely, definitely. So you mentioned about GamStop, and again, reading from from your blog post, it seems that apparent that
Yeah.
GamStop was really important for you. Um, so
Yes.
how was that experience?
It was definitely life changing. I dread to think what state I would have been in if I hadn't signed up with GamStop.
Mm.
And I don't really know what triggered it. I know that it was in about January 2019, so a year and a half ago. Um, I think I was so unhappy with myself. I was so kind of at that point I was, as I said, my relationship had ended. I was unhappy about that. I think at the time I was unhappy with my work situation, and I thought, well, I just, there's one part of my life here which I really need to get sorted, is the gambling. So let's just do this. Sign up with GamStop, um, and go from there. And I mean, I don't know, I don't know how many people are aware of GamStop, but I can kind of briefly explain it. It's essentially, if you sign up with GamStop, you can self-exclude
Mm.
from every UK licensed casino.
And
So you won't.
is that, sorry to interrupt, George? Sorry, is that land based or online?
No, that's online, on
Brilliant.
every UK-based online casino.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So I mean, I know there are similar schemes for land-based casinos,
Mm.
but this one for me was a real game changer, because you just can't join, and believe me, you do try. You know,
Yes.
there must have been 20 times since I've self-excluded that I've tried to join a casino,
Yeah.
and it's great because once you're excluded, you just can't join, and then I don't know, it breaks that process. Like it was previously so easy to join a casino and then just start gambling.
Yeah.
All you need is a break in that habit. All you need is a message saying, sorry, you cannot join us, and then you go off and you get on with your day. It's amazing how easy it is to break the habit once it's not accessible. I
Yeah.
don't know if that sounds really obvious,
Oh,
but
again, once again, not for the first time, I'm nodding furiously because
yeah,
for me, my obsession was the source of addiction was land-based casinos. So I
yeah,
I rung up, I think, the National Gambling Helpline. It may have been through
right,
GamStop or whatever, but again, very
yeah,
similar to yourself. Rung up on a bit of a whim.
yeah,
On sort of on my journey back from a horrible experience and horrible day at the casinos in London,
mm,
and then was
yeah,
banned and I self-excluded. And in my sort of naivety or my ignorance, I didn't realise that it was all casinos. So I thought it was like just the one that I'd rung up.
right,
So there were several times that I was then, like you say, trying to get back in. Um,
yeah,
the embarrassment of being with friends on a night out and being turned away
yeah,
from the door. Um, but you're absolutely right. And once again, I can completely relate to what you said because it
yeah,
just cut it out. It's like, if you're addicted to
yeah,
smoking, but you can't access cigarettes, then you probably
yeah,
stop smoking. Um,
yeah, and then you gradually think about it less,
yeah,
and that's what I found. The I suppose I shouldn't say. I won't elaborate, but there are ways around GamStop which are really really difficult. And I know when they first introduced GamStop, there was a few stories about it wasn't quite working, and
mm,
there were ways around it. But I know that it's being I don't know, improved
mm,
sort of gradually, so it's much harder to now get around these things. Um, and it does. The longer you go on, the less it enters your mind. And kind of the sort of just the less you gamble basically.
yeah, no, sure. So how's your outlook right now? So I mean, you maybe in terms of your betting and your gambling, like you say, are you
Mm.
completely cold turkey, or are you able to have maybe the odd football bet and that be okay, or um, you know,
I'm 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 probably somewhere between the two. I still place your football bet, um,
mm,
but it just doesn't have the same hold over me. And in terms of gambling online, I haven't done that now since January 2019.
mm. Do you miss it?
So I
Do you
you
miss
know
it at all?
sorry.
Do you miss it at all?
Do I miss it? I do actually. Yes, there are bits of it that I miss. Definitely, I miss
Mm,
you miss that rush. As much as that feels like the wrong answer to give, I think it's the honest one. I think every gambler to some extent misses when you win. But every time I think that, I think how miserable I was
yeah.
when I was losing. And there were so many paydays where I remember it so clearly. My wages were going at 12:30 on a Thursday night, Friday morning,
Mm,
and by 2 a.m., so within an hour and a half, I'd sort of halved my wages.
jeez.
And I remember that feeling of just being so angry at myself.
Mm,
You know, so whenever I think about the bit I miss, I think, well, you know, you, it's kind of your memory playing tricks on you because I was unhappy for 2 years, and as I said at the start, really can't remember most of 2017 and 2018. So
no,
uh, yeah,
no, it can be quite hard to put in words, I think, when you've experienced a big loss like you've just described, in a matter of hours.
yes,
Or, um,
yeah,
it's very very hard
yeah,
to describe it, isn't it, to someone else, that you just feel this sort of numbness, this sort of nothing, this void between, I think, between happy and
mm,
sad. You talk about sort of dopamine levels where scientists have proved that whether you're winning or losing, the effect on the brain is almost the same. And I guess
yeah,
that's quite a relevant thing. Is, I don't know about you, but I just felt like this nothingness. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just sort of felt, ugh. you know.
Well, this is the thing, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I even felt happy when I won because because even when I won, I knew what I was doing. I was like, well, okay, congratulations, you just gambled and won a grand or whatever. It was, in my mind, it was dirty money. It was,
Yes.
it was a horrible feeling. It really was a horrible feeling. And yeah, and also, not telling anyone also was, made it even worse. And my parents still don't know actually.
Mm.
So hopefully they don't listen to this.
Yeah.
But it's I find it a really hard thing to talk about actually. I think and I think it's great for someone like you who does the podcast. But I mean, I've really got to force myself to talk about it because
Mm.
I do still feel that sense of, I don't know whether it's shame or guilt or whatever, but yeah,
Mm.
you feel weak in some way. You feel like you're a weaker person than other people, which is illogical, but yeah.
Mm. No, I definitely feel you. I definitely feel you. I think um, I'm still convinced, but by people like yourself talking about it
Mm,
openly and by having these conversations, I think we can really break down barriers as well. Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I think I don't know. I think for me, like it was a real horrible experience. A chap in the local community basically sort of took his own
mm,
life because of suicide.
yeah,
Because of gambling, and and it's just hearing what the effects are like for his loved ones and the family, and
yeah,
I think that they also feel a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. It's quite a taboo
yeah.
thing,
It is,
to
yeah,
kind of
definitely.
tarnish with. So yeah.
And I even compared to something like drug addiction, and I would never downplay drug addiction or alcohol addiction, but
Mm,
we talk about those things a lot more easily than we do about gambling. I don't know whether that's my imagination but I do feel like, not that there's more support, but we're more willing to have a conversation about alcohol addiction than we
mm,
are about gambling addiction, and maybe that comes down to the secrecy of gambling addiction, or I don't know.
mm.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe it seems sort of so ingrained in our culture. Horse racing, and
yeah,
I don't know about if you're a member on like WhatsApp groups or with your mates or whatever. A group of
yeah,
lads. But,
yeah,
it's so entwined with the sort of the culture of I don't know, of the modern
yeah.
culture or whatever.
Well, actually, yeah, it is. And a funny one thing I should say about, again, online casinos is that online slots are presented as games. They're called games on the site, and they share a lot of the same characteristics as video games. So it's presented as um, harmless fun. It was interesting. I was on before I did this. I was on the homepage of I think it was Casumo, which is one of the kind of the biggest online casinos. And just looking at the language they use, it is all words like fun, reward, prizes. It's like a video game. Um, so and again, I think that contributes to why it's a little bit more hidden than things like alcohol addiction and drug addiction. And again, even talking about it, it makes me so angry.
Mm,
It really does, because it's so disingenuous. It's so, yeah, it's so cynical, I think.
mm. Mm. No, yeah, I posted
Yeah.
something recently on Instagram. It's I sort of did a bit of diving and trying to get some facts out, and I think forget her name. I know her surname is Coates, but the
Mm,
chief executive of Bet365, she took home
right.
I think 323 million last year. Um,
Yeah.
like just smashed it, just smashed out, smashed it out the park,
Yeah.
in terms of earnings.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sure you've seen on your Twitter feed, like I've seen on mine, recently, since during lockdown, you'll see tweets from Bet365 or promoted advertisement tweets on my Twitter feed. I don't know if you've seen that, but I get it every day. And that's something which has only happened since lockdown. Um,
really,
you know, yeah.
gee,
So that's a deliberate way. I think because there's been no live sport, they've had to shift their emphasis onto into online casinos. So how for somebody who's struggling with an addiction, if you're trying not to gamble, then you're just on Twitter, and suddenly on your Twitter feed up pops, you know, uh, Bet365 or whoever. It's yeah, you're you're knackered basically.
Yeah, no. I mean, well, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's like it's all right, sort of, quote unquote, banning it from the TV and the radio, but I mean,
Mm,
like you again, you mentioned is like the marketing. I was still getting, even though I was banned from all these casinos, I was
yeah,
still getting free bet offers. I was getting postal,
yeah,
offers and not VIP schemes. I think I wouldn't be in that bracket. I wasn't spending enough money, but
yeah,
it's everywhere you go. It's text, it's email.
yeah. I get
It's so
probably
intrusive.
a text message. I get a text message every day, at least one every day, from some online casino, and that's probably partly my fault because there's probably just some that I haven't unsubscribed from.
Mm,
But even regardless of that, it's a huge marketing push. Um, and again, it's all these little trip ups that you go through, when you're coming out of an addiction. But I've now sort of gone full circle, or sort of I've done a 180 on that, and they just really annoy me now, these texts. So yeah, I mean, it's funny. One thing again, I don't know if it's sort of thing to touch on here, but there's a lot of YouTubers now who seem to sort of they stream on online slots, um, and a few of them I've seen them mention that they sort of their casinos are the casinos they use are based in Malta, and they get invited out to Malta for sort of lunches and meet and greets and all that sort of thing. Something I haven't looked into it too much yet, but it's just something I've noticed a rise in people streaming online casinos on YouTube and on Twitch and that sort of thing.
oh, really? What? So similar to someone streaming, like, a stream of, I don't know, them playing Call of Duty. So they're
Yeah,
streaming them playing a
yeah,
slot.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they stream online
Bloody hell.
slot sessions, and some of them have got you know sort of hundreds of thousands of subscribers, which again just and I'm sure they're sort of, I think they're affiliates of, I don't actually, I wouldn't want to get into that,
Yeah.
but yeah. Yeah, it just shows you how pervasive it is.
Jeez. I can't help but wonder, the lines are so blurry, with children. I mean, again, for me, my
Mm,
granddad would always play cards, and that the connotations of, well, blackjack, and it's a very
yeah,
murky area between, is this just a game, or are we now betting for money? And then, you know,
yes, yeah,
it's a very blurry. The lines are very blurred between what starts off as something quite innocent and like a bit of entertainment to then, um,
yeah.
betting.
And I personally, I don't know how online slots can be considered like entertainment. I'm yet to meet someone who can go onto an online casino, lose 50 quid, and go, oh well, that was fun. Oh, I might do that again in a month's time, but I'm not bothered. I think 99.9% of people who go onto an online casino and start betting, I think to some extent they will become problem gamblers, because I honestly think it's human nature, and even when it's not human nature, it's the subconscious. You're drawn in. It's that dopamine hit, and that's just a natural process. So
Mm.
the defense of a lot of these companies is, well, it's fun, for the majority. Obviously there are some addicts, but not many. Well, I disagree with that. I think I think very few people have a completely trouble-free experience with online casinos.
Mm. Mm. Well, it is a very, yeah, murky. Well, to go back to what you said, it's a very murky world.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
yeah. So George, I mean, I feel like I could probably sit here and chew the fat for another hour or two, but
Yeah.
it's actually it's been a brilliant conversation. I mean, is there anything that you want to sort of finish with, or anything that you want to touch on that maybe you've not brought up at all?
um that I've not brought up. No, I think the two big things for me, I know everyone says it, but the first thing is if you have an addiction or you feel like you have an addiction, uh, tell someone, try to tell someone, um,
Mm.
whether that's a friend or family or just picking up the phone to a helpline. I think once you tell that first person, I think that's the biggest step. And I know that everyone says that, but it really is,
No, it
it
is.
really is true. Just to have that validation from somebody to say that this is not your fault. Um, and the second thing is GamStop. I really would, for anyone who's got an online addiction, just sign up with GamStop. And once you sign up with GamStop, you don't have a choice. You are excluded. And you can drive yourself insane trying to sign up to casinos, but you will always get the same message. Sorry, you can't. You're barred from signing up. So I think those are my two big takeaways. I would say from my 2 years of online slots.
Blimey,
3 years of online slots, I should say.
3 years. Three
Oh, and
years.
don't go to Las Vegas. Don't go to Las Vegas. That's another thing.
I
'Cause
was going to
that's
say.
that's where it all went wrong for me.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if you've been to Vegas, but it's an amazing, awful place. It's like it's a brilliant, horrible place. I've never experienced anywhere like it in my life.
no,
Um,
it's a couple of my mates have been there, and they're just tried to sort of swayed me to come for
mm.
this year, but luckily coronavirus has wiped that out, and
Yeah,
think going on the internet and announcing to the world that you have a big gambling addiction is finally kind of
yes,
quashed those ideas. But
yeah.
um, I mean, George, look, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today.
Likewise, thanks. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
No, it's no, well, thank you. It's been marvelous that you've given up your time, and you've been
Yeah.
very open, and like I say, well, very brave, really. As I say, if you've not spoken to,
Mm.
you say this is what, the first time that you've maybe sort of um,
Well, I mean, I wrote,
spoken about
as I
it?
say, I wrote a blog a week ago. Um, I don't know what made me write the blog. I think I was just annoyed and kind of. I think I read an article online about gambling, and I was kind of thinking, well, that's rubbish. That's not true. And I thought, well, I'm going to write about my experience.
Yeah.
And the number of people who messaged me saying, that mirrors my own experience.
Mm.
Um, it's not. I don't know. It's not satisfying, but because it's still an awful subject. But it's just very revealing to see the number of people who have the same problem. Um, yeah,
No, definitely.
and I think it's great. This podcast, I think, is great because it's a way of really really getting it out there. You know, yeah,
Well, fingers crossed, eh? That's no, it's yeah, no. Well, I think, as I say, that's the main aim, isn't it? Really, is it's just you know
yeah,
the invisible addiction.
it is. Yeah,
it is. Nobody would know. And yeah,
absolutely
it's through people like yourself that make it possible. So it's
sure.
it's been, as I say, nothing but a pleasure. I mean, I'll be leaving links for the listeners for benefit right now. I'll be
Yeah.
leave links in the description box below. But link to the blog post, George.
Oh, that's a good question. It's on my. I'll give my Twitter handle, which is George I Cooper at George I Cooper on Twitter, and it's pinned proudly to my profile. um, yeah, you can have a read of it on there. And I'm gonna do a few more. They say write about what you know, so yeah,
Mm.
why not?
No,
Um,
definitely. I thought it was a really good read. By the way,
Thanks.
I kind of wanted to read more. It's like, oh, so yeah, you've definitely got a keen follower from this side.
That's good to know. That's good to know. Thank you.
But right, George, I don't know about you, but I'm still sweltering, so I think it might be
Yes,
time for a cold shower.
absolutely. I appreciate having me on. Thank you very much.
No, thanks, George, and
All right.
I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Cheers.
It was a real pleasure talking to George and hearing his story. Thanks once again to him for talking so openly and sharing his insight. There's always plenty of takeaways from the conversation, and I can relate to a lot of what he said. How addictive playing online slots is, and how many hours you can spend betting on your device. Struggling to get out of the vicious cycle of a gambling addiction, structuring your day around gambling and not being able to get it out of your mind. The links to depression and relationship breakups, and using gambling as a form of escapism. The importance of telling somebody about your addiction and putting in controls to help you stop gambling. George mentioned the importance of using GamStop, which helped him stop gambling. So in the next episode, I'd like to speak to someone from the service. Let's find out in the next episode of The Invisible Addiction.